Okay, we did the first material, and now we're going to create some masks to be able to generate dirt on these. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to copy this, bring this one down, and mix them together. And of course, using and changing this in material instance. So what we are going to do to generate the mask is to generate a mask for each static mesh. For example, for this one, we're going to create our GB mask. For example, one of the masks generates occlusion data, one of them generates surface data, and one of them generates some general noise data. And put those masks inside an RGB channel, RG and B, in a texture, and use that RGB mask to generate dirt and noise and moss and anything in places that we want based on the geometry itself. So how we do that? This is a scene with the list of static meshes we use to generate the dock, and we have them here perfectly fine. And you see here, if I go into material preview mode, you see the material separation is here as well. So we need to think about this because we're going to mix these all in one single material. So by that, I mean we're going to bring this inside Substance Painter, and using the generators inside Substance Painter, try to generate dirt on places, for example, like this, where the cavity collects, or on places where it's affected by occlusion. So how do we do that? We should do that on a UV level. But if you look at the UVs of this one, let me go to the UV editor. And if you look at the UV, you'll see that this mesh has been composed of a lot of UVs being stacked on top of each other, because we composed this mesh from a lot of repetitive meshes, and there are some 4 or 5 meshes that are composing this static mesh only. So you see in here that there are a lot of UV islands stacked on top of each other, and it's not going to help us generate UVs inside Substance Painter, because Substance Painter in most cases needs unique islands to be able to generate perfect data. For example, if we now try to bake these inside Substance Painter, we're going to get the repetition all over the place, and everything is in here. It's going to be overwritten on all of these, but I don't want that. I want every mesh to every static mesh that we have placed here to generate this to be counted as a single static mesh and generate to the baking process. So how do we do that? We're going to separate these islands, but I'm not going to do this in the static meshes themselves. I'm going to take a copy from each one. For example, let me take a copy from this. I'm going to bring this out and use this instead as a backup file. So when I'm done with it, simply delete it. I'm going to keep the first one untouched. So let's take this, and you see the UVs being untouched here as well. I'm going to bring the UV packer, and in this one I want to set the padding to 1 and every setting in here, because I want to use the full maximum 0 to 1 UV space. So hit packing, and the process is going to take a bit of time, of course a short time, because we have already unwrapped it, and it's going to only place it into 0 to 1 UV space. So give it a bit of time. It's going to take something in between 1 minute to 2 minutes for each piece, because the piece you see in here is pretty dense and it's going to take a while, but of course it's worth it. Later on, when we see the results, you're going to love it. So it took me no more than 2 minutes, and the UVing is done. You see, it has laid out all of the UV islands in here, perfect for us. And we're going to bake our infos on this inside Substance Painter, and when we made sure that is working perfectly fine, we copy these UV and transform the UVs from this mesh onto the second UV channel of this mesh. And if we go to the mesh settings in here, you see it has only first UV channel, which is responsible for the color data, and we're going to create another UV channel and transform this UV that you see here onto this mesh so that we are able to use that inside Unreal Engine to generate the dirt. And the UV creation process, UV transformation process is it's no more difficult than clicking on here and creating a new UV map, and you want to select it and hit this icon to make it activated. So when you selected this one, you select this one as the last object, hit Ctrl and L and go to copy UV maps. And when you hit the copy UV maps, let's go in here. You see that the UV maps of this one has been transferred into here, and we can use this map to generate dirt in Unreal Engine and do all sorts of things. And when we go to the first UV map, you see it's untouched. These UV shells are in their place. So let's do this. And I'm going to create one UV for this because it's a relatively big mesh, and one UV for this as well. So let's copy it and bring it out. And go into its UVs, and we're going to use the same settings and hit pack. And it's going to take a while to generate the UVs, and I'm going to be back when the process is done. So this one completed under a minute, which I'm happy with. And now let's go and take this one, bring it out. And when we're done calculating the UVs, we bring this inside Substance Painter and try to texture them there. Of course, we're not going to texture, we're going to create RGB mask to drive dirt on mask that we have. For example, driving occlusion on or basically we will decide on that inside Substance Painter. And when we're done RGB mask creation, we have some RGB masks that we can export into Unreal Engine and then later on use for each static mesh. Okay, this one done also. And one thing that I'm going to do is giving these different texture sets. So let's give this another material. I'm going to call it Dock 6x6. Okay, so that when we import this inside Substance Painter, we get different entities instead of overlapping UVs. If we set the materials of all of these to be the same, we are getting a lot of overlaps inside Substance Painter, which we don't want. So you see the material on this is bark 5, on this is bark 4. It should be different, so I'm going to make it descriptive. So let's make it Dock 4x4 and make this one Dock 2x2. Okay, and now I'm going to take these and convert them into one static mesh. First, let me copy them and let's hide everything, and the only thing that I'm going to do is deleting this material, this red material on these, and make it one unique material. Because if we import it like here inside Substance Painter, we are getting two textures set for this. That is not really what I want. I'm going to have only one texture set for all of these. And because it's only going to be black and white mask, the resolution isn't going to be an issue at all. That is why we can place multiple of these into only one single material. So let's see the name of this. I'm going to call this planks and make this one plank as well, so that they belong to the same texture set when we import them inside Unreal Engine, inside Substance Painter, excuse me. So let's give this plank material, let's do this here instead of there. So, and I did it on all of those. Let me select all and go to assign material, assign a new material. I'm going to call it planks and planks 01, for example, or make anything descriptive. Or let's name it planks walkway. Okay, the name doesn't matter really. You should name something that you have familiarity with. So you see, all of them have the same texture set. So I'm going to select all of them and go into the polygon mode. And it's now a matter of hitting the packing button. And when we hit the pack button, it's going to place all of the UVs different in different places. And when we separate these meshes, we are going to get perfect things, because these meshes is going to have the UVs on its own place, this mesh as well, and this mesh as well. But combined, we are going to use one only RGB mask for this whole pack. Okay, the packing on this is finished as well. If I zoom on here, you see there are a lot of islands in here, which is normal because these are multiple of three meshes. And if I look at them separated, I mean, this is the effect that I told you. These have been placed to complete each other. And this one as well. You see the island have been placed perfectly, and maybe we export a mask that is 4K for this. A 4K for a mask is going to be overkill, but to get the most quality, I'm going to do that. So this is about this one as well, and we are only left with this remaining. Okay, let's take them, duplicate them, and I'm going to do the same thing for these as well. And let's isolate them and give all of them a unique material, something to remember. For example, let's make them fences. Okay, and let's check them one by one to see if all of them contain the same material. Yes, it does. And let's select all of them. I'm going to do the same thing, go into here and hit pack only, so that we get the packing done. Okay, the packing on this was done as well. So before that, I went ahead and applied all of the transformations to get the packing right. So let me go into the packing, and yeah, the packing is done. I first applied all of the transformations so that it knows the proportions and things in that nature. So this is finished as well. The materials are doing their job. Let me go into the main view to be able to visit all of them. Now what I'm going to do is take these ones and bring this back and select these, select all of these and bring them in here so that it's centered a bit. Okay, and now I'm going to take all of these and export them as a single FBX file to Substance Painter. And when I was done really texturing this inside Substance, I mean creating black and white masks, I then come back and transfer the UVs and test them inside Unreal Engine. So let's first hit a save, incremental save, and take the exports as an FBX. So take them all, and I'm going to do the regular FBX, not the BATX. So from here, I'm going to limit to selected and leave the rest as untouched. And for this one, let me rename it to RGB mask. And then you hit export FBX and wait for the calculations to be done. Okay, here we are in Substance Painter, and I'm going to import this using all of the same settings. This is the file that I exported. So let's import and see what we have done so far. So it imported everything successfully, and let's see, we have this walkway, we have the fences, and then we have 3 pieces of dock. Okay, it's done now. And now we'll bake these on top of each other. We're going to bake them on top of each other. So let's demo one of them out using one that is a bit like this, cheaper and easier to do. So I'm going to go into texture settings, and in here as regular I'm going to bake mesh maps, and I'm going to use the low poly as the high poly and bake the output to 4K, leave these ones untouched, and sampling up to 4x4. So let's hit bake and wait for the finish. So the baking process is done, and now let's go hit B to visit the bake mesh maps. This is ID and this is ambient occlusion. And now you see what I'm talking about here. You see the areas where the meshes are interacting with each other, we have a lot of occlusion, and since the UVs are unique, we are seeing the unique result everywhere we look at. You see in here there are a lot of occlusion happening, which is in nature a natural thing. A lot of dirt and dust would gather in these areas. So now that I'm looking at this, it's a really perfect result we have in here. Okay, and now let's demo what we can do with this and then go and bake them out all. So we have the maps baked. Let's add a layer, and for visualization let's make it red. So let's say that we are going to assign the red to only occlusion data. So from one of these masks, of course you are free to choose whatever method you want, from painting, hand painting, or using procedurals, but in this way I'm a lot happier using these because these really confirm to mesh perfectly. So let's pick this occlusion one, and now you see it has placed it on the areas where the data is more occluded, and then later on in Unreal, so that we can tell it to apply a material only on this red parts. Of course there are room for improvements, and we can do a lot of improvements as well, but this is a good starting point. And let's say that for some general dirt I'm going to use a green channel. So I bring up the color to be, let's use RGB instead, and bring the red down, bring the blue down, and bring the green up. So let's mask this using this one. No, this one overwrites the occlusion data, which I don't need. Okay, using this one, and you can also increase or decrease the intensity of the mask. For example, using this green to drive some dirt on areas where have been selected as green. So this is basically what we are going to do, and the blue as well. But instead of using colors, we are going to use channels, which we'll learn. But before that, let me delete all of them and go and bake all of these as well. And it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to first have in mind that you should save them all every time, because Substance tends to crash a lot. So I'm going to go into the texture settings in here, and the result, the output size, everything is in its place, and I'm going to bake and wait for the result to be finished. So I did that and did the baking on all of them, and if you hit B now, you're able to see the baking that the substance has done on all of these, and it's perfect throughout. I'm happy with it, but there's a little problem on this. I can really live without it. I can fix it, but let's leave it be because it's a small thing in a whole kit that is not going to be seen really from so close up. So there's not really a need to touch it because the mesh is clear, but the masking is going to have some problems and we're going to fix it. Okay, so let's start with this one because it's top on the list. And now let's see, when we are going to export textures, we are going to export individual channels. You see in here, let me drag this one down. When we are exporting from Substance Painter, we are exporting these channels. You see sRGB, base color, metallic, roughness, normal, and height. So we're going to add some customized channels to host the RGB channel for us. Alongside with this base color and things like that, we're going to press this button in the texture settings and channels. Press this button, and these are these users channels. Let's bring user 0 and then user 1 and then user 2. And unlike these channels which couldn't be renamed or anything, we can really rename these as well. So let's name this user 0R or red, this one green, and this one blue. You should have the names in mind as well. And when you press C to be able to visualize the individual channels, you see in here base color, metallic, which shouldn't be like here. It was on this layer. I wrongly painted something. Let me delete this. And we have the metallic, roughness, normal, height, and then user 0 red, user 1 green, and user 2 blue. We are going to put the RGB on these so that we can later on mix and match them together and output as a single image file. So let's go out, and in here let's bring a fill layer and call it black, because in here I'm going to, you see this user 1, 0 and 2, and in here let me go to one of the users. You see it's pure white. It means that user red is now pure white. If we export this, we are getting white in red, green, and blue. And to make that a background, I'm going to drag this one down so that the background for all of them is black. So everything we add upon here would be white. It creates a black and white in every channel. A black and white in user red, a black and white in user green, and a black and white in user blue. Okay, let's add another layer, and now let's just separate the color and user 1 because I want to make the color of the user 1 red. Of course, you really do not have to do a color because you only need the user channel, and the color you really do not need it because we are not going to export a color map out of this. But for visualizations and to see what happens with the color, with the channel, I'm going to keep the color and later on really delete it or leave it untouched. So we have added a fill layer, and let's name this one red, and let's go in here into this smart mask section and try to pick one of these procedurals. You see this one is holding the information for us, and we can also go in and do all sorts of manipulations with the mask that we have here. So let's bring it down a bit. This one could host some occlusion data for us. Okay, I'm happy with this. It's alright. And now let's add another channel, another layer, I mean, only color and the user green. And now in here, let's drag the red down, blue down, only green up. We want scientific numbers, not something in between. For example, something like here, we want pure green, which is 0 in red, 0 in blue, and 1 in green. Okay, and now let's see what we can do about the green. Green, let's see what we can do. For example, this edges, it's about finding a good noise that will represent what we want. Okay, this one is good, but is overwriting the previous one. And this is good for some overall noise. Let's keep the green for overall noise and go into mask editor, and I'm going to bring the balance down just a bit. And of course, you really do not have to use the green channel or blue channel. We are separating them, and later on inside Unreal, we can turn them off or use them or add to them. Basically, whatever you can think of it. So let's add a filter and make it a blur so that it's not so contrasty. And it has some transitions in between. Okay, but not so much. Let's make it something like this. Okay, it's good. And now that in mind, we have the red for occlusion data, the green for general dirt, and let's see what we can use blue for. And now only activate the color and user 2. And now if we go to the individual channels, you see the mask that we created for red, and this is the mask that we created for green, and this is the mask for blue, which is this one, and we're going to give it a mask. So let's make this one green and this one blue. And now use one of these procedurals, for example this one, and now test it to see what we have created. Let's make the color blue by turning down red and green and bringing up the blue. Okay, this is too strong. Let's look for something else. Let's make the color blue first, and then add this. And this one is good for some selective noise generation to make some texture variation. Okay, and now let's select these that we created, and of course this black one underneath it. I'm going to copy that and save the file before that. And I'm going to repeat the same process for all of them as well. So let's hide this to get a bit of performance back. And in here, I'm also going to the texture set settings and bring 3 channels. User 0, then user 1, then user 2. Okay, and now let's paste this, and it's going to calculate for us. And let's compare it side by side by this one. It's pretty much the same. And let's go in here into the noise generator of this blue and try to make it something else or manipulate it, or even we can go and use another different channel for that. So let's, for the blue, let's give it something else. Or for consistency's sake, let's keep this. Okay, let's keep this only for consistency's sake. And later on, we will take care of that inside Unreal Engine if we wanted to use a lot of that blue or not. And this is good as well. So let's visualize the channels. This is user 0, user 2, and user 3. Excuse me, user 0, user 1, and user 2. Okay, and for this one also, we do not have any information in this channel yet. Let's add user 0, user 1, and user 2, and then paste the information in here. It's going to wait a bit. Okay, and this is the information that we want. Okay, and perfect. And now let's go for fences. Okay, and in here as well, I'm going to bring user 0, 1, and 2. And remember that these channels start from 0 to infinity. Okay, copy the channel in here as well. So let's look at them, and I feel like I need a bit more blue in here as well, but not that much because these are not so occluded meshes. So let's go for another one, which is the last one, and this planks walk away. And in here again, I'm going to select user 0, 1, and 2, and again paste my channels. Okay, I believe this is enough for what we need really in here. So let's go for blank, for this blank one, and put the color to be black to really be able to visualize the RGB mask in here. And the black areas are the areas which are untouched, and these green, red, and blue areas which are the areas which are going to be influenced the most. So let's go for blue, and I feel like in here I'm going to use another mask instead for general dirt. Okay, let's go for this. This one is alright, but I need to be more overall. Okay, something like this. I'm happy with it. Let's increase it a bit and then blur it. Okay, this is good, and let's blur this one because I really do not want it to be so sharp. Okay, on blur it's fine, and let's visualize others as well. We only go to the black one and bring this one down. Okay, fine. And as I said, these colors that we added in the viewport are just for viewing purposes and really nothing more. And later on, when we export this, we are not really going to use them. These are only for viewing inside Substance Painter. Okay, and bring this one to black. These blacks are going to be the areas which are untouched in the shader when we create it inside Unreal. So this one black as well. Okay, for now I'm happy with how the texture distribution is going on. So let's save it, and we are going to create an export template that is good for exporting these channels out, not the base color, normal, or that kind of things. We're going to export user created channels. So let's go for output templates, and in here I'm going to create a new one. and let's call it mask export. Okay, and in here I need to bring one of these templates. Gray, we're not going to use it. RGB is for image, for example a diffuse image, albedo image, because it has RG and B. But this R plus G plus B is what we are going to use because it has 3 different channels and it's perfect to use. So for our names, I'm going to put the T underscore, which stands texture, and then we're going to use the texture set. So click on this icon, and in here we are going to select texture set. Okay, and then underscore or GB mask. Okay, and for the template I'm going to set it to PNG and 8-bit, nothing really wrong with that. So let's assign individual channels into here. So for the user 0 I'm going to set it to R, user 1 I'm going to set it to G if you remember, and the user 2, be selective with your selections, you might select something wrong, and user 2 I'm going to set it to be B. Okay, and now let's go and select the template that we have created. I believe it's going to be down here. Okay, mask export. For the template, it's going to, for the file type, it's going to be based on the template, which is PNG, and for the size I'm going to export them as 4K. Okay, of course I gave it the export path, and let's hit export. And it's not going to take too long because these are some simple textures and really take no time to export. And this is the result of those textures that you see happening in here, and we're going to import them inside Unreal. And since we use the texture set in that template that we created, we know what we are going to create. So this belongs to dog 2x2, t underscore dog 4x4, dog 6x6, fences, and a path walkway. So we are going to use these to generate the textures inside Unreal. But before that, we are going to create a second UV channel for the meshes to be able to use this data. So here we are in Blender, and I believe we gave this one the second UV channel. Let me look at it. Yeah, we have the second UV channel in here, which is working fine. Let's take a look at it. And now let's go for other ones. So let's take these two, hide them for now, and take this one, create a new UV for it, activate it, and then shift click on this one, hold down control and L, and then copy UV maps. Okay, now let's inspect the UVs on this one as well. Okay, fine. And let's hide these two as well. And here, let's create a new UV, activate it, shift click on this, control L, and copy UVs. Okay, we have to really inspect on UVs to see if they work or not. Okay, this one is fine as well. Let me hide this. And this is the tricky part in here. These three share the same UV. So let's see what we can do about it. Let's go. Create a new UV, activate it, select this one. We are selecting them one by one. Okay, Control and L, and copy the UVs. And now let's go for the UVs in here. You see the UVs are perfectly in place, which what we wanted. This is the UVs that it shares with these. Okay, this one is fine. And as you remember, this has a couple of materials, and we haven't changed the materials on this. Instead, we changed the material on these temporary ones, which we are going to delete. So this has a couple of materials, this one also a couple of materials, and this one also a couple of materials. So have that in mind as well. So Again, create a new UV for this, and Control and L, copy UV maps, and look at the UVs of this one. Okay, fine. And now the last one in this row. First, we need to create a new UV map for it, activate it, so that if you do not activate it, you're going to get your UV maps in here, which we really do not want. We want the UVs to be placed in this one. So shift select this one as the last one, copy UV maps, and select this. Yeah, the UVs are in the place perfectly. Okay, let's save these, hide them, and we are left with this. Let's create UV channels for this. First, I'm going to create a UV channel, and select this, activate it, shift click, Control L, and copy UV maps. Select it. Before that, activate it. Let me activate all of these before doing anything. And create a new UV for this as well. It looks like we didn't create a UV for it. Okay, now with this UV is activated, Control L, copy UV maps. Select this one, Control Shift, then Control L, and transfer UVs. Okay, we are really getting the final stages. Okay, this one as last, and this one as the last one. Okay, and now let's select them, go into the UV editor, and the UVs are perfect in here. Okay, let's hit Alt and H to bring all of them back, and we're going to take these temporarily ones and bring them in here so that we are able to see these only. So I'm going to take them all and activate only the first channel of them. This is optional, I believe. I haven't done the other method exporting with this UV as active, but I normally, as a hobby, select them and put the first UV as active. Okay, and then after doing this, I'm going to export them and re-import them inside Unreal Engine and test their second UVs to see if they are working or not. So only simple maneuvers remaining. It's a bit time consuming process, but the result that you're going to get from this is really a huge one, because the mask that we have created is really conformed to the mesh and brings the reality into the next level. Okay, and this one as the last one, and just check them. Okay, all of them are doing their best, and let's select these. Because I do not need them, I really delete them. Of course, I have a version of this file which I have these ones, but I'm going to keep only these, and I'm going to bring up this batx and give the initial export folder onto this as well, because I'm going to hit export so that those files get replaced. So I'm going to the folder where all of these reside and then hit accept. And then it's all about selecting them one by one and exporting them. And really have in mind that we want to disable this one material ID because we really do not want this to have only the same material because these contain a couple of material IDs. So for this one, let's hit export and it exported. So I'm going to take all of them and only hit export. And because the name are the same and anything, basically the pivot, anything are the same and untouched, they're going to be really perfectly replaced with the previous versions. And we are not going to get any problems when we import them inside Unreal. I mean re-import them inside Unreal and test them. Just have that in mind that you should have the name, the pivot and the materials untouched. So this one, the pivot is okay. Let's hit export. And the second one in this row, export as well. And this one from the last one in this row. Of course, have in mind that if you have a couple of material IDs, you really should turn this one off. So depending the size of the object and the amount of polygon, it's going to take a bit of time to export for each and every of them. So these ones are going to take lesser time to export because they are rather cheap meshes, really without any problem. They export as you press the button. So export and these ones as the last ones. And now that we have exported all of them, it's now a matter of going into Unreal Engine and try to test. And when we made sure that the UVs are all of them are correct, then we start to create the material. Okay, here we are in Unreal and let's go to meshes in here and look at this one. It has by accident it has a couple of UV channels, which the first one is this, the map that you remember we created, and the second one being the map that it created for baked lighting situation. And since we are not using the baked lighting situation, I'm going in here and in this menu there should be an option generate light map UVs, and I'm going to tick that off and apply changes, and it's going to remove the second UV channel for us. You see, now we have only the first UV channel that we created in Blender. Now I'm going to re-import the base mesh, and it's going to take a bit to compile. And now when we look at that, we have the first UV and we have the second UV, which is responsible for the dirt generation. We created this just for now inside Blender. So let's go for other static meshes as well to see if we have allowed generation of light maps. If it is basically having two UVs, 0 and 1, you disable this and hit apply changes. It removes the second UV channel for you. Then you can safely re-import the mesh to get the result that you need. Okay, and now let's go and watch the second UVs. It's alright, perfect. And it's now time for this one, which should take a bit longer because it's a huge mesh. It has two UVs. It should have only one UV because we're not going to use this in baked lighting situation, and we're going to use Lumen, and Lumen really doesn't need any light map UVs in terms of the light map UVs that we created inside Unreal Engine 4. So now we have only one UV channel, and let's re-import so that the UVs get replaced. Okay, now we have the second UV, which is this one, perfect. And now let's hit Control Shift and S to save everything in the scene, including the map itself, and then go for others. So this one, take it off and then re-import the base mesh. So the UVs, perfect. When you're creating nanoid meshes, just have in mind that activating this will do a bit of heavy burden on Unreal Engine. So try to take that off if you're using nanite and lumen. Because using this method, we really do not need to have any light map UVs, and it's going to have a little bit of more calculation to do. So be sure to check that off. So now import the base mesh. Okay, now the UVs are right, and the first channel UVs are working alright as we expected. So let's exit out of this one and go for others as well. Okay, and now re-import the base. Okay, this one is done as well. The UVs are in their place. And now let's look if we haven't messed anything in terms of rotation or movement or anything, because they might happen when we re-import meshes. So let's go for these ones, and these ones are going to be the cheapest ones, and they're not going to take so long. So select them, and they have the generate UV as well, so apply, and it's not going to take so long. Only reapply if we had something reset to base and gone. Okay, apply this one as well, and later on after this we are ready. When we made sure that the UVs are in the place, we are really ready to start layering textures on top of textures to make this a bit more beautiful. So if you really turn this off upon the imports in the initial part when we first imported these, we really wouldn't have had so much problems. But that is part of the process. So the UVs of this one are doing as well. These last ones. Let's turn this off, apply changes, and then re-import the base. So check the UVs, fine. In this one, and re-import, and check the UVs as well, fine. And this is going to be the last one finally. Okay, apply changes, re-import, fine. Now basically we have done everything we can in terms of preparation for that material. So in the next session, we will create the actual material by layering on top of layering using those masks that we have created. So I have forgotten, let's go in here and let's see if I can delete these two materials. These were two basic materials that we created in the first place, and we do not need them, and now let's import them. Okay, here we are. Let's take them and import them. And one thing that we can do is setting the compression setting of all of these textures to mask. Let me open them. All you need to do is opening the texture and in compression settings set it to mask. Okay, this one has mask as well. And this as the last one. And let's take one of them and see what is happening in individual channels. We have the red channel, the information is alright, and then we have green channel, and then we have the blue channel. Everything is alright and working. Okay, hit Control Shift and S to save everything out. In the next session we really start to create the actual material layering using these textures, and for starters we use the starter content textures in here. And when we made sure that everything we want is in order and it's in place, we create their materials inside Substance Designer or Painter depending on the material, and then re-import it and use these textures, re-import them by those textures. So for now we're going to use the base textures that you see in a starter content of Unreal Engine, but we're going to replace them later on, and this is temporarily. So see you in the next session.